Alexander Volkanovski will humble Ilia Topuria. Volkanovski is 13-0 in the featherweight division, and his last 8 fights have been title fights. And he has also beat elite fighters like Chad Mendes, Jose Aldo, Brian Ortega, Max Holloway 3 times, the Korean Zombie, and Yair Rodriguez. And what has Ilia Topuria accomplished? He has beat Josh Emmett and Bryce Mitchell, his only ranked opponents, who are 1 and 2 in their last 3 fights. So guys, let me break it down to you how Alexander Volkanovski will humble Ilia Topuria at UFC 298. Hey guys, welcome to the False 9 podcast here with episode 196, and this is your host Alvaro. Today's episode, as we all know, is going to be about UFC 298. We have Alexander Volkanovski versus Ilia Topuria, and then our co-main, Robert Whittaker versus Paulo Costa, Geoff Neal versus Ian Gary, Merab versus Henry Cejudo, and Anthony Hernandez versus Roman Kopylov. I think that's how you pronounce that name. So a very excited and anticipated card, I would say. The most recent fights in the UFC and the single pay-per-view event that we had this year wasn't the most exciting. I know UFC 297, I don't think it had any finishes. So, yeah. And then the 2 fight nights or 3 that we've had haven't been the most excited either. So it's very refreshing to get some good, exciting content. And with that also being said, really not posting as much and having the time off in December, I feel like I'm really prepared for fight week, and the content that's coming out, I think it's really quality. So I really hope you guys enjoy the content and the episode and the following clips that go on the other channel. So hopefully you guys enjoy that and just enjoy the intro. The intro I thought was pretty badass. So hope you guys enjoy it. Today's episode, like I said, is going to be all about UFC 298. I'll start with the main event first, and then we'll work our way down to the Paulo Costa, Robert Whittaker, and then we'll kind of skip Ian Gary versus Geoff, but we'll do Paulo Costa, Robert Whittaker, Merab and Henry, and then Ian Gary versus Neal, and then Anthony Hernandez, which we kind of just barely talk about at the end. But that's the order that we're going. And with that being said, let's get right into it. We have Alexander Volkanovski versus Ilia Topuria. And I always like to give my first thoughts and my first feelings when this fight got announced and when we heard about it. So, shortly after he lost to Islam Makhachev, it was pretty clear that he was going to fight Ilia Topuria. Before the Islam fight, he wasn't going to fight till February, which was going to be Ilia Topuria. So that fight was kind of already scheduled and already in the works to make. So we all kind of knew about it. And at the time before the Islam fight, hearing those rumors, I was like, oh, that's lit, that's good, whatever. Then we all kind of forgot about it when he fought Islam. But, coming off that knockout, and then, 5-ish months later, you're going to fight a really good contender that we don't know how good he is, but the hype seems to be there. You're fighting him next, right? So that's how I felt. I was like, damn, will it be too early for Volk? How much of that KO, how much damage did it do for him mentally and physically? So there were those things there. And then, for Ilia, I was like, good for Ilia. Volkanovski's beat Holloway 3 times. He's beat Yair. He's beat Ortega. Some Jose Aldo, Chad Mendes. He's beat a lot of good guys in the division with some new guys there now too. So Volkanovski kind of needed a new guy to fight. So it made sense why why Ilia and Max hasn't happened, because they want to keep him up for Volk, because if Max beats him, then they don't deserve a title shot, right? So it makes sense. That's why they never scheduled a fight with Max Holloway, to be honest with you. And I think that's why he hasn't fought since last year in the summer, I believe. So that's kind of my first thoughts and feelings towards the fight. But like I said, throughout time, and I was like, man, Volk has this. Volk has this. And with me just looking at fights and looking at other things, just more convincing that Volk has this. So it's really how I really feel, and my first thoughts. So let's move on to, I guess, a little bit still about the fighters. Ilia's confidence has been one of the most, marketable or standing out things about this fight. Besides the fight itself. He has said that he's made a documentary. He's made like a little commercial or hype video with the Rose. He has also said that he's gonna beat Volk. That his face is whatever, like not even gonna recognize himself. He says that Max and Yair and all those guys, he's not gonna give them a chance because they're not even gonna want a chance because how bad he beats Volk. So, very, very confident and somewhat, arrogant, which is understandable. He wants to be confident, he wants to be marketable, and he wants to make a lot of money as well as kick ass. So there's really nothing wrong with that, but I think it's like I mentioned in the previous video, like I think it's just a little disrespectful towards Volk. But each person, do what they do, and it is what it is. And I think, I start to think like, why is Ilia trying so hard to, predict or, talk so much shit or just sound so confident? Like it's kind of ridiculous, right? And he's grabbing a lot of attention of a lot of different people, including myself, and people are fucking with the confidence. Like, oh, like, yeah, let's go. Or people are like, dude, what the fuck? Like, what are you doing? Like me. So he's doing, if he's trying to market himself and hype up himself and the fight, he's doing that and he's doing it really well. But I'm also thinking like it feels, that he's trying to copy Conor McGregor. Like, honestly, the back tattoo is what got me. I was like, I saw his tattoo the other day. I was like, this is so similar to the tattoo that Conor McGregor has. Like, so similar. Very identical. If you guys look at it, I think Conor's just a little bit bigger, but it's so similar. So I think he's trying to, push, towards like that McGregor stardom. And also, McGregor got a popular name, Mystic Mac, right? How he would beat his guys and he would say it and he would do it. And it feels like Ilia is trying to do a little bit of that. So I think that's what he's trying to do, because if he does get it right, and the only way he does win is by a knockout, because he didn't win a no decision against Volk, then, he'll be right. He'll be right on the money. And that's the only outcome of that fight if he wins. So it makes sense why he's marketing like that. And it makes sense how he's speaking. I was like, okay, if this is what he's trying to do, then it makes sense. I get it. But again, a bit disrespectful to the champ. And I'll say, why it's disrespectful, and to talk a little bit about both fighters and their history. Like I said in the intro, he's Volkanovski has been in what? He's undefeated, 13-0 in the featherweight division in the UFC. And his last 8 fights have been title fights. Out of the last 3, 2 of them have been in the lightweight division against Islam Makhachev. So, like, that's the one thing that I'm just like, you got to respect the champ. 13-0 in the UFC. His first fight was in 2016. We're in 2024. So 2 years away from 10 years in the UFC. So it's just impressive, man. And to talk a little bit about, the lead up to his title run, he beats Chad Mendes. Then he beats Jose Aldo. Then he beats Max Holloway. He fights Max Holloway again. Then beats Brian Ortega, which when we saw that Brian Ortega fight, at least for me, I saw like why Volkanovski was him and why he was so good. And I want you guys, when I bring up these fights of Volkanovski, think about how it would go for Ilia, right? Ilia Topuria. How would these fights go for him? How would the fight with him and Chad Mendes would go? I mean, that would be a scrap fest. That would be a fun fight, when back in that time, if Chad Mendes would have fought against this version of Ilia, how would it looked against Jose Aldo, right? That fight would be crazy. And then we get to the Max Holloway. How would Max Holloway look against Ilia Topuria? Like, what I'm saying? Like, how would that look? And look how Volkanovski did it and how he made it look. So then, Brian Ortega, what happens when Brian Ortega has Ilia's neck like that? Like, and Volkanovski gets out of it and then just starts beating up Brian Ortega, and then Brian Ortega gets the neck again, and then he just Volkanovski gets out of it again and starts beating up again. And then after that, after Brian Ortega, he fights Korean Zombie, which, kind of just gave it to Korean Zombie. Then he fights Max Holloway for the third time and just shuts down Max Holloway, who we should be calling, I don't know why Ilia gets the name, but Max Holloway is considered one of the best boxers in the UFC. And Volkanovski just shut him down. Shut him down. And what Volkanovski did to Max Holloway was beautiful in that third fight. Then after that, he moves up, fights Islam Makhachev, and has a really good fight against Islam and arguably wins that fight. He did so good on the feet. He did so good on the ground, on the clinch, up a division against someone who's definitely pushing 170, 180 pounds on fight night against Islam Makhachev. Then he goes and, he loses to Islam, but it's really close fight. He finishes that fight on top, takes him down, drops him, and then just gets full guard, and he starts teeing off some nice clean shots against Islam Makhachev. Then he goes defends his title against Yair Rodriguez and completely figures Yair Rodriguez out. Yair Rodriguez was landing some weird shots, some weird kicks, some weird, elbows. It was just, he just fought weird. And Volkanovski figured it out. It's like, how would Topuria look against Islam Makhachev? How would he look against Yair Rodriguez? Obviously, we can't make that comparison. But that's why I think it's a bit disrespectful to Volkanovski. Volkanovski, throughout these fights, he just gets better and better each round. He starts to figure out what you do, your tendencies, your little habits in that octagon. He will figure it out. And he did it towards Islam Makhachev. And that's why he had success at the end. His cardio was fucking on point as well. When he fought Yair Rodriguez started landing, to talk about the Yair Rodriguez fight, Yair Rodriguez lands a nice leg kick and then a combination up top. Then he starts a combination, then the leg kick. So he kind of flip-flop, but that's what he does, 2 times in a row. He does it the third time, starts on the top. Then when he's finna go for that leg kick, Volkanovski gets out the way and just stuns him. You guys don't know what I'm talking about, just go watch. 10 seconds before he gets a TKO or the finish against Yair Rodriguez. So, those little things that you do throughout the fight, Volkanovski is just gathering all that information, and then he just uses it against you in the fight, in the later rounds, and he just gets better throughout the fight. And the longer this fight goes for Ilia Topuria, the worse it's going to get. Ilia's best hope are in the early rounds, 1 and 2. Once you get to 3, 4, and 5, good luck, for real, against someone like Volkanovski, who has been in title fights in the last 8 fights. That's what? If he's fighting twice a year, that's 4 years, 3 years, just title fights. And that's another thing that kind of stands out in this is that Ilia Topuria only had 1 fight last year, right? He only had the fight against Josh Emmett, if I'm not mistaken. And then he had fought 6 months prior to that, which was in December. Yeah, so he fought only once last year, and prior to that, he fought in December. So he's fought at least to me, only fighting once last year. I know you're fighting early this year, but not, you fight Bryce Mitchell. You have a fight now with Josh Emmett, so kind of the main event. But now you're jumping into you're jumping into a pool with sharks. Pay-per-view event where you got media Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Even till Saturday, you got media. Right, Volkanovski has been doing this his last 8 fights. And this is your first time doing it. Don't get me wrong. I think he'll be able to handle the media and all that stuff. But that stuff takes a toll on your body. It just mentally eats your energy slowly but surely. And let's say, someone like Ilia is just not used to constantly talking, constantly doing interviews while cutting weight, having the press, having the flashes, having those interviews. That's a factor in the fight, not being active and then jumping into this pool with sharks. It could have a factor. We're at the smallest, and I think that's where Volkanovski has a little bit more of the edge against Ilia. Again, being more, I would think, being more active, especially in the last years, and then just handling the media. Like I said, Volkanovski's one of the best. So you're going to get one of the toughest media weeks for the fighters, for Ilia and Volkanovski. So, all right, let's talk about what both, or I guess, well, hold on. I didn't even talk about Ilia's wins against Bryce and Josh Emmett. So that's a little bit, I guess, Volkanovski having that success and how he does it and getting better in each round. That's Volkanovski, right? Now we talk about Ilia Topuria. He only has 2 wins against 2 ranked guys, which is Josh Emmett and Bryce Mitchell. And those guys are not even like top 5 material, in my opinion. And I think Josh Emmett was 5 at the time. So, you have 2 solid wins and you fucking destroyed these guys. But those guys are, rank 7, rank 8 type of guys. You haven't fought a guy like Yair, like Brian, like Max Holloway, and Volkanovski. You haven't fought one of those guys and what it's like to be in the ring or in the octagon with one of those guys. So, it's impressive that he was able to do what he did against Josh and Bryce. To talk about the Bryce Mitchell fight, Bryce Mitchell, that was a good fight for both of them. Both of them are, I believe they were undefeated at the time. We all know Bryce Mitchell was a more wrestler type of fighter. And then Ilia, being more like a boxer. That's what he's known for. And Ilia did really good with the takedowns. I thought he was a bit reckless in the fight. I thought he was a bit wild. But I think, his confidence and knowing that the damage that he took wasn't going to be enough to put him out. And I think that's why he was a bit reckless and just wanted to kill Bryce Mitchell. So he did real well. He looks nice. He looks clean against these fighters. But like I said, these are not elite guys, right? Who's going to show you a lot of different things. Bryce Mitchell, not really good when we talk about standing game, but he's really good at wrestling. Josh Emmett, not really good at wrestling, and to be honest with you, not really good on the feet, but has power and is a pretty good striker, like just average striker, you could say, or good striker. So if he lands one, he could put you out because he has that power. But that's what he's good at. So Ilia get those wins, very good, very impressive, but you find Bryce and Josh and Volkanovski's better than Josh and Bryce combined. And Volkanovski is just going to show you a lot of different things. And that's where, again, the lack of experience and jumping into this big pool of sharks with, like Volkanovski is just going to be different. And I'm curious to see how, Ilia is going to react to something like that. And last thing, when we talk about the fight itself and how it's going to go, people talk about Ilia being one of the best boxers in the division. And I can see why people think that, right? He moves and looks like a very good boxer. He moves and weaves and looks nice, looks slippery. But these guys that he's fighting are not really good strikers. So if he's really decent or good at boxing, he's going to look great. He looks moving. He's not getting hit. He's constantly moving his head, boom, boom, boom. So he looks nice. And it's annoying as fuck that people be like, oh, he's one of the best boxers in the UFC. And I'm like, well, he hasn't even fought a good guy that's good at kickboxing yet. How can you guys say he's one of the best boxers if he hasn't even fought a good kickboxer yet? So it's kind of weird that people call, him the best boxer or he could fight professional boxing. I keep seeing that shit on Twitter this week, that he's the only fighter that can fight professional boxing, which I'm like, bro, get the fuck out of my face. Like, please. A lot of people are going to feel very different about Ilia Topuria after Saturday. No matter, even if he wins or loses, if he wins, people are still going to feel different. He's going to have work to do. If he loses, he's just not there yet. It makes sense, right? So that's that. Now let's talk about the fight itself and how I think this fight's going to go. With this experience of Volk, and like I said, Volk takes his time. It's a 5-round fight, and he gets better throughout the rounds. With the most recent experience getting knocked out, Islam, Yair. But I think the Islam first fight and now the second fight, I think he's learned a lot from those losses. Like a lot. When he fought Yair, he was like on a different fucking level. Just showing you so many different things on the feet. And then he would just take you down and then just beat you taken down, get you back on the feet, start kicking the shit out of you, start hitting you on the body, in the face. Just a lot. And Ilia, doesn't really use his legs. His movement's amazing, but doesn't use his legs to create space for himself or just to show something threatful. And Volk uses every part of his body to show threat, whether it's his legs or his hands or even his head movement. But he's constantly kicking your calf. That's one thing he does that I've noticed is he's constantly working, your legs, kicking your calf, kicking your thigh from the first round. And it's just like a little boom, boom. But it's, every round he's attacking that leg, both legs, just attacking that leg. Then he might touch up your body. Like he's constantly hitting you in different places throughout the whole fight. So when it gets to round 4 and 5, like your calf is hurting, your thigh's really hurting, and then he just puts it on you. And people don't credit enough Volkanovski for that. And it was one thing that I noticed. I was like, this dude is constantly working one part of your body or multiple parts of your body throughout the whole fight. Like I said, whether it's the calf or the thighs or even the body. And he creates a lot of space for himself and creates a lot of openings for himself as well doing that. And, Ilia being, I hate saying one-dimensional because his wrestling's pretty solid from what we've seen. But, I don't think he'll be able to outbox Volkanovski because he won't be able to get close to Volkanovski. If this was a boxing match, he probably has a chance, maybe. But Volkanovski's real quick, and he just knows how to move and get out the way. So I don't think Ilia can get close to Volkanovski. I don't think he'll be able to get close enough in range to put up combos. I think he'll have some nice counters, but to put something together and to be the aggressor and to initiate the exchange and land on that exchange, I don't see it. I see him landing on the counters. It's hard for me to see him, initiate the exchange and really land a combo and keep it going. I see him trying to initiate the exchange and Volkanovski attacking the leg, going for the takedown, hitting you with a nice jab. Like every time he is going to try and go in, I can just see Volkanovski trying to go for a takedown. And how are you going to defend Volkanovski's takedown? At this point, he's one of the best grapplers in the UFC as well. So it's like the biggest thing of the fight is how is Ilia going to react to all this stuff being shown to him in the fight with all this media, all this clout you could say with Fight Week. How are you going to handle just Volkanovski himself when you're trying to get close and trying to put a combo and you can't? When it's round 4, you're kind of tired, your calf is hurting, your thigh is hurting, and you want to initiate a combo, and then he just pieces you up, and then he just takes you down. Then he's piecing you up again. Then he lets you get up. Then he attacks the leg, starts chewing off that leg. Like that's what I'm curious to see how Ilia is going to react, because he's going to get beat up a little bit. Like it's just going to happen. So, I just see Ilia having success in the first, second round, landing a few good shots. You could say like exciting shots, like, oh shit, he landed a hook or he landed an uppercut. But then, I see him fading away, getting a bit tired, and the work that Volkanovski has done with the legs, maybe a little bit of your right or left thigh, your calf, like I said, your legs, calf, or thighs, it's a bit beat up, and he will just start to attack that 3, 4, and 5, take you down, beat you up, and possibly get a TKO, or if not, just win a nice, clean decision. That's how I see Volk winning this fight, and that's how I see this fight going. I just see the more experienced fighter just outclassing the new guy, the new dog, the new contender, we can say. So, not taking anything away from Ilia. Ilia's going to do really well, and he's going to do a lot of good things. But Volkanovski just does everything better and more. Like I said, he's really good on the feet, so has really good strikes, everything. Really good at kickboxing, really nice leg kicks in the calf, onto the thighs, to the body. They're nice. And in his ground game, his takedowns are amazing. What he did to Yair at the end to finish that fight, reads Yair in the combination, capitalizes, lands a nice hook, and then starts piecing him up and then just takes him down. Like that whole sequence and how it happened and how fast it happened, it was just overwhelming. And that's what I think he'll do to Ilia in the later rounds. Now, if Ilia, a lot of things got to go right for Ilia to get this win. He has to land a really good shot. And Volkanovski hasn't been put out with the hand. He got put out with the leg kick that kind of hurt Islam Makhachev. He went out and said that. And he has to do it early. He has to do it real early, like in the first and the second. And, Volkanovski having a full camp, being healthy and be everything just a lot healthier than his last fight. It's just going to be, I think it's going to be really hard to be able to put out Volkanovski. And if you're not prepared to go into those deep waters and just unknown territory, that'll be a mental battle of its own while handling someone like Volkanovski. But I could see where Ilia Topuria pieces up Volk and then just puts him down. I can see that happening, but if I don't see it after round 2, I really don't see it happening at all. But there's a chance, and Volkanovski could be kind of done at this point. What if he goes in there and he really hasn't recovered from the TKO or the KO from Islam, and he's just not all the way there, and he's just not the same fighter anymore? That could happen too. I don't think so, but that scenario's there, and it's a possibility. And that's where Ilia could capitalize on. And I think if Ilia had better leg kicks and threw a lot more leg kicks, he would have a lot of success. One of the patterns that I noticed with Volkanovski, a lot of the gaps for the opponents were made setting them up with the leg kicks, whether it was to the head, to the body, or to the calves, to just the thighs. That's when, Brian Ortega, Max Holloway, Islam Makhachev had success. But Ilia doesn't really throw leg kicks, so I don't know. He might in this fight. I think he should if he hasn't, and if he's pretty good at it. But yeah, guys, that's really how I feel about Volkanovski and Ilia Topuria. I have Volkanovski winning in a TKO in the round 4 or 5 or just decision, but I think Volkanovski just capitalized towards the end of the fight and just gets the best of Ilia Topuria. And if Ilia wins, he has to win in the first round or the second round. That's it. So let's move on to the next fight. So now we have Robert Whittaker versus Paulo Costa. I didn't think this fight was going to happen. I'm surprised that it's still scheduled to happen because we all know Paulo Costa's history and just unfortunate situations that he finds himself in, whether he pulls out or there's an injury or something else going on. But he has pulled out of a lot of fights in the last few years. And the fans are kind of, trolling him and kind of frustrated in a way towards Paulo Costa. Because Paulo Costa, he talks a lot of shit on social media and trolls a lot of people on social media. So that's kind of its own battle. So I'm happy, though, that this fight's still scheduled to happen. And I'm scared that, something's just going to happen fight week, and for some reason we may not have a fight for Robert Whittaker and Paulo Costa. But I'm hoping they still fight, and I really hope that it stays scheduled, because if it does, I would just like to see, Robert Whittaker bouncing back from the Duplessis fight, and then, Paulo Costa, he needs to get back in rhythm, because I've said this about him. I think he's a really good fighter, and, if he stays consistent, I can see him fighting for the title or just fighting to be one of the best fighters in the division. But he hasn't been consistent and is just constantly pulling out fights. In his most recent fight against Khamzat Chimaev, which was a very, very hyped fight, and a lot of people were looking forward to that fight. And of course, he had some infection, which was very reasonable. But, and we don't see those things. We don't know about him, and we just all think he pulled out. But, later on, he came out and showed us what was going on with him, which is kind of disgusting, to be honest with you. So very unfortunate, because that's a fight that I really wanted to see, and us as fans wanted to see. But, then we saw Khamzat get tested by Usman, so we got that out of it. So that's kind of the first thoughts, I have of this fight. But I'm very excited to see how both guys come out, right? Because I think it's very clear what Robert Whittaker is trying to accomplish, right? He wants to get himself back into the title conversation. And if he wins this fight, whether he fights the winner of whoever's next for Drakus, or he could possibly fight, a number 1 contender title shot, whatever they want to call it. But, have another fight that gets him to the title. And for Paulo, I don't think a lot of people expect him to win, and I think if he does win, I think he can make an argument to fight for the title, because he beat a big name like Robert Whittaker, or he can definitely get his shot against Hamzat again, which we all still want to see. So there's that. So that's kind of what at stake on this fight. I mean, you could say, or for the fight. I don't know what direction it's gonna go. Paulo Costa looked really sloppy. I thought against Luke Rockhold. Luke Rockhold is not even fighting anymore. He went on and did bare knuckle. I don't know if he's still doing that or not. But he struggled. I understand the fight was in altitude, but Luke Rockhold landed some very, very clean shots on you. And, if it wasn't a 3-round fight, I thought Paulo Costa was going to be out of it. I mean, Luke Rockhold, too. I mean, he couldn't even stand up anymore. So it was kind of it was definitely a slugfest, but kind of sloppy, to be honest. So Robert Whittaker, being a cleaner fighter, more experienced fighter, and like I said earlier, has beat a lot of really good guys. It's just kind of hard for me to accept and see a way of Paulo coming out victorious out of this fight. I was surprised, when Marvin beat Paulo Costa. I don't think, Marvin's a guy who's up there for sure, but to me, he's never broken the barrier to beat an elite fighter. And the fact that he was able to beat Paulo Costa, it's kind of like, damn, and Robert Whittaker beat Paulo Costa. I mean, Marvin, he's been there. He's been in there with Israel, with Sean. I wish I could say his wins real quick, because let's see. So he has beaten Marvin, Kelvin, Jared, Darren Till, lost to Izzy, has beat Yoel twice. Brunson's in there. So that just goes to show you who Robert Whittaker is and who he has beat. And it's very impressive who he has beat versus Paulo Costa, who was in a very good fight against Yoel Romero. But, I mean, that's probably his last notable win, which was years ago. So I think it's going to be a very one-sided fight for Robert Whittaker. I think he'll, control the whole fight and just kind of do whatever he wants. Obviously, to an extent, right? Not just he'll do whatever he wants with Paulo, because Paulo's a really good fighter. But, the history, the resume, Robert Whittaker's just more active. I can just see him piecing up Paulo and just beating him on the ground, on the feet, and just in every exchange. And I think the only hope for Paulo Costa is if he can find a way to land that clean punch. We saw Robert's chin get tested against Duplessis, which was a kind of accidental punch, I think, to be honest with you. Obviously, Drake is through it, but the way, Robert Whittaker ran into that. And Paulo Costa, I think he has a lot of power. The dude is shredded. So if he can find a way to land a clean punch or just even a clean leg kick, I think that's where he can get the best of Robert. But he has to do that early on, like in the first round, to establish that and then just to get the best of Robert. Because I think once he goes to the second or third, I think Paulo gets tired and then Robert just, it's just going to beat him up. And I don't think Paulo Costa gets finished, but I see Robert Whittaker winning this one in decision. And Paulo Costa, the only way I see him winning is by knocking out Robert if he can find a way to land a clean punch against Robert Whittaker. So that's really what I think about the fight. I'm very excited, though. This fight's going to be, again, like the Merab and Henry fight as well. I mean, this is a fight that's going to be fought in the middle, I mean, there'll be movement all around the octagon, but they're going to be in their face the whole fight. And each one of them is going to want to make a statement to further their career in the UFC. So I'm excited, man. This fight's going to be a banger. And I really hope, these guys are big boys. So I really hope that we can see a nice knockout from either one, to be honest with you. So let me know what you guys think about this fight. Let me know who you guys have. So we have Henry Cejudo versus Merab. I'm not even going to try and say his last name because it's too hard, and I've tried, but I can't. But this fight's going to be very exciting. The fact that it's still early on the card is even exciting because it just shows you how good this card's going to be. And we need a stacked UFC card because, this year we haven't had a card yet that's really, really been dramatic, you could say. So first thoughts of Henry and Merab. The fight got announced. I was kind of upset for Merab, or I kind of felt some type of way because I think he's deserved a title shot. And I get that that's why, why they gave it to Cheeto. But, and Merab's brave for taking the fight, because I mean, I can see fighters just waiting, for the outcome of Sugar and Cheeto. And then he gets his title shot. Because, I mean, Merab's on a, 9-fight win streak, which is pretty crazy. And it's kind of crazy that he doesn't have a title shot. And I know previously because Aljamain Sterling was the champion and he didn't want to fight his teammate. And now, I think if he definitely wins it, whoever wins this fight is definitely getting a title shot. And Sugar should just stay there and be defending at 125. So that's kind of how I felt initially for Merab. And for Henry, I'm surprised that he's going to keep fighting, to be honest with you, as well. I thought he was just going to try and go for the title, and then, just that's the end of it. But it seems like he wants to give it another go, at the title and just being at the top. And it's very understandable. I mean, he was an Olympic champ. He was double champ. He achieved a lot. And I think he feels like maybe he walked away too early and there's unfinished business for him. So very excited to see him back on a non-title fight, a 3-round fight as well. And we'll get into that in a bit. So that's kind of my first thoughts of the fight. And it's just very exciting, I will say. And to get to more of the fight now, 3-round fight. Henry Cejudo fought a 5-round fight recently. I want to say Merab did as well against Peter Yan. So now you're transitioning. You go for 5 rounds, and now you transition into a 3rd-round fight. And we saw Usman kind of struggle with this as well. And I'm not trying to say that these guys are going to struggle with being a 3-round fight, but, from fighting consistently or recently and training for 5 rounds and now going into 3 rounds, Usman said himself, he's not used to fighting 3-round fights. And that's why he starts off real slow and then starts to pick it up in the later rounds. And he felt like he could have done more in those early rounds against Hamzat. So to make that, to keep that in mind, I guess, that, Merab and Henry are fighting 3 rounds. I think that could be a factor, to whoever can manage the time better, right? To obviously not overdo it so early. And then also, like, not just want to go all out in the 3rd round when you already, maybe lost 1 round and maybe 50-50 the other. So you don't want to put yourself in that position either, because we've seen that happen where it's a 3-round fight and they want to pick it up in the 3rd, in the late 2nd, and they completely got shut out in the 1st. So, it just causes a very tough decision. So I think that's a very important thing, the fact that you have 3 rounds and these guys are used to 5 rounds, you could say. And I would say Merab has a little bit more experience with the 3 rounds because Henry Cejudo, coming back and he's been in title fights. And then when he did come back, another title fight, so I feel like he's going to be the one that has to adjust to that more than Merab will, especially Merab being the more active one in general. So I think that's going to be a factor in the fight. And, I've watched Merab and Peter Yan today. I also watched Henry Cejudo and Aljamain Sterling. In the last few weeks, I've been watching both of those fights, or both of their fights as well. But that's what I watched today. I kind of made my final conclusion, my final thoughts of the fighters and the fight. And I will start off by saying that this fight is going to be very, very entertaining. It's going to be active. Merab is a very aggressive fighter and is coming at you consistently. Henry Cejudo is in your face consistently throughout the whole fight. And not really, Merab coming at you consistently. Henry always trying to close the distance, cutting off the ring, things like that. So these guys are going to meet in the middle a lot and just kind of exchange, whether it's leg kicks or strikes and even takedown attempts. So it's just going to be very, very active like that. Constant leg kicks, constant feints, constant strikes, constant takedown attempts, constantly going into clinch and having those exchanges there. So, that's going to happen right off the rip. So from round 1, and these guys, I think they have great cardio. I mean, these guys are going to go at it for 3 rounds, and it's going to be entertaining, right? Very good. So I think that's how the fight overall is going to go. Like, just very entertaining, clash. And now to get it even into a more detailed perspective, watching Merab always going for a takedown, consistently chasing or looking for a takedown, right? And it seems like he sets those up with his hands, and he does real well sometimes to sneak in that takedown when he's kind of somewhat, trying to go for a clinch or in the clinch. But, we all know, and Henry lets us know as well, that he's an Olympic wrestler. And how I'm curious to see that exchange, when Merab goes for a takedown. And if Henry's going to be able to defend it, or if he does let it go to the ground and he's going to try, and turn it around against Merab and he's on full mount or something like that. So I'm really curious on that exchange. And, just to see if Merab's going to have success on the ground. Because, we saw Aljamain have some success with Henry, which is kind of unheard of. But, Henry was a little rusty, and Aljamain is a really good grappler. So, and I think that just kind of opens up things for Henry. Like I've mentioned in the intro, Henry's movement in the octagon to me is really impressive. How he moves in there and kind of where he places his body and how he moves, like just his weight, just his movement to me just stood out a lot. So, when Merab's going in for a takedown, like I'm curious to see how Henry's going to handle, like if he's going to stuff the takedown and go for a clinch, or is he going to try and fight in the ground, or if he just gets taken down, right? I'm just really curious with that, right? So that's, you can say the ground aspect of this fight and how it's going to go. I don't really see Henry trying to go for takedowns here. I think if it goes to the ground and for Henry, if he's like winning on the ground, I think it's because he stuffs the takedown and then he gets on top or something like that. But I don't really see Henry approaching and initiating a ground exchange with Merab, because Merab is, really good on the ground and is really good just striking on the ground as well. So that's my ground aspect to the fight. And then, when you look at the striking, I think, Henry Cejudo, he throws a lot of feints. That's one thing that I saw from Henry. And I think Merab hasn't fought a fighter like that who's constantly just feinting at you, right? Just constantly moving. And I think that's what Henry does so well. And I'm curious to see if Merab's going to hesitate or if he's going to fall for those, and if Henry can set up something with those feints, right? So, and just constantly trying to be in your face, Merab being the aggressor. So it's going to be curious how, like I said, how that exchange is going to be, because they're going to just be in their face, and I mean, they're just going to have to exchange. So I'm curious to see how that Merab's going to handle that. The feints as well. Merab doesn't really throw feints. Or hesitate like a lot, like someone like Izzy, Sugar. Who else does this a lot? Real good. Really, Izzy is one of the best, I can just say. But anyways, Henry does that as well. He throws feints, or he does this, does that. A lot of movement. So that'll be very interesting for me as well. And when we talk about the striking, it's clear to me that Merab doesn't have that KO power, right? He doesn't have a knockout win. I think, yeah, right. He doesn't have a knockout win in the UFC at all. Henry Cejudo has dropped his opponents, has TKOs, things like that. So it's clear to me, at least, that the stronger striker is Henry Cejudo. And I saw him land some clean punches against Aljamain Sterling, which was very interesting to me because he couldn't get close to Aljo. And when he did get close, he landed some pretty good shots. So the fact that he'll be able to like the striking distance with Merab, I'm really curious if he's going to be able to put up some combos, or if Merab's just going to be real, slippery enough to get out of there and go for a takedown or just counter. So that striking aspect, I think Henry has the upper hand. But if Merab can just slip out of there, and just go for a takedown, I can see that happening too. And then we talk a little bit about the leg kicks. I think Henry uses his leg kicks really well to set up combinations up top. And he landed a really good punch on Aljamain. Showing him leg kicks, I think 3 or 2 right off, like, low, one to the body, one to the calf, and then he faked one to the calf, and then just came back on top and landed a clean shot on Aljamain. So he's really clever with his legs. And this is what I like about Henry. It's just his movement, how he maneuvers in the ring, what he shows you, the feints. It just seems like Henry Cejudo has an answer for everything that goes in or is happening in the octagon. If Merab moves this way, Henry adjusts and does this. Like he is, I think constantly making like reads on you and constantly making decisions on every movement. And it just seems like he's a step ahead and just know what's about to happen. And that's what just stands out to me when Henry is fighting. And I know he got beat by Aljo, but, I think that was just kind of like Aljo did just so good of managing that distance against Henry. So, yeah. And for Merab, this is going to be his toughest fight. I know he had a really, really good fight against Peter Yan and just completely shut Peter Yan down, like just completely. So, Merab is a very patient fighter, and he will, come at you for 5 rounds. The same pace and just constantly be in your face, constantly throwing strikes, leg kicks, constantly attempting to take down at least 3-4 times in a round. So, his output is a lot, right? And that can also be, something that he could use against Henry. But Henry did so good against Aljo, and Aljo's output was very similar till the later rounds. He slowed down a little bit and got a little hurt. But, if Merab doesn't take enough or doesn't take a lot of damage and just can overwhelm Henry Cejudo for 5 rounds and get the best of him in those later rounds as well, I mean, I can clearly see him winning a decision. And if it does, when we talk about like the outcome of this fight, if it goes to a decision, I really just see, it's hard for me to see Henry win a decision against Merab because, Merab doesn't get finishes. Merab just beats you every round. Excuse me. And he's going to win the decision. That's what Merab does. And he does it really, really well. So I think Henry, the best way for him to win is to finish someone like Merab, which is very hard to do. I'll tell you that. I mean, Merab's a very tough guy. But I mean, I can see Henry just controlling the fight for 5 rounds. Like I mentioned earlier, his movement in the octagon is one of his best. So I can also see him just shutting down Merab completely and winning a decision. Or, I'm sorry, earlier for saying later rounds. It's not 4 or 5, right? So backtrack. Merab, I mean, now that I think about it, for 3 rounds, I mean, Merab can just go at Henry for 3 rounds and just beat him. And for Henry Cejudo, if he's aware that it's just 3 rounds, like I mentioned, I can see him just controlling the fight and just shutting down Merab completely. And I think that's where the 3 rounds could help someone like Henry Cejudo. If you shut him down for 1 or 2 and just win those rounds, you practically win the fight as long as you don't get knocked out. So it's going to be a very, very technical fight, and I don't know who's going to win. Like, this fight is 50-50 down the middle. I think the better fighter and the most experienced guy, Henry Cejudo, should be able to win this fight. But Merab is hungry. A 9-win fight streak, or 9 fights without losing, which is crazy. So very good streak, and I think whoever wins this fight is going to have their shot at the title. They're going to fight the winner of Cheeto and Sean O'Malley. So that's what's kind of at stake on this fight. So it's going to be good. It's going to be very entertaining. And I think it's going to be very, very high skilled. And this is a fight that could be a championship fight. If things worked out a different way, this definitely could have been a title fight. So that's kind of what we're having early on the card, which is going to be crazy. So curious to know what you guys think of the fight. So let me know in the comments. All right, guys. So we have Ian Gary versus Geoff, or Geoff Neal. Sorry for the mispronunciation. So not going to get it right all the time. So Ian Gary was supposed to fight a few months ago. That fight got canceled with him and Vincent Luque, which kind of sucked for Vincent. But he had a pneumonia, and that's kind of when all this stuff was kind of going on with him and his wife and all that drama, which I'm not going to even talk about. So kind of exciting to see Ian Gary back because, besides all that drama, Ian Gary is a really, really, really good fighter, and I think he could be, up there competing for our number 1, number 2 rank spot, especially if he gets a win over Neal. So I'm happy that he got scheduled and right back in it right away. and recover from from pneumonia. And it's going to be very interesting to see how everything plays out for him. This fight week with media and people bringing up, a lot of stuff about Ian and his wife and all that drama that had happened. I think, that's going to be a battle of its own for Ian, because there's going to be, people trolling Ian and trying to get in his head, whether it's on Twitter, YouTube, or any other social platform. So I think, as long as he's mentally strong, because to be honest with you, when he was scheduled to fight against Luque, I don't think, he was mentally there and mentally ready for that fight because of all the stuff that was going on. So it's kind of happened. It's kind of good that all that stuff has happened and kind of went by, because now, he's kind of dealt with it. It's probably, talked to his wife and, figured things out, mentally, emotionally, things like that. And it's probably in a better headspace right now to fight and compete. So I'm not too familiar with Neal's fighting, and with even Ian Gary himself. I've only seen, I think, his last two fights. But he's up and coming, and he's a really good fighter, and he's been training at Shoot Bronx or Shoot Box, something like that, where Charles do Bronx Oliveira trains at, and has that gym over there in Brazil. So the fact that he's took his camp over there and was part of that culture, and Charles accepting him and his team accepting him, which is pretty interesting. And I'm curious to see how Ian's going to look, Again, to remind you guys, as much as all this drama happened with Ian, he's really good, and I think he can be a top contender in the division. So I think if he gets this win off Neal, then he can be fighting a top 5 ranked guy in his next fight. So he should get the win. I mean, he has really, really good kickboxing. I mean, his leg kicks are brutal, especially what he did to Neil Magny, which was crazy. So I think he can definitely get a W, and possibly, I can see him really getting a finish against Geoff Neal and, coming out victorious in that way. So it'd be nice, for him to make a statement. I'm not going to judge the man from his past or just what he's done and the life decisions that he has. He has a wife, he has kids, and he seems to be happy. So, I wish him the best, and I want to see him shut everybody up, like, and we all know Ian Gary as a UFC fighter, nothing else, because that's what he is to us as the fans. He's just a UFC fighter, and there's no reason for me to really care or just get involved in his personal life. I think it's kind of weird, to be honest with you. So I really want to see him do good, and I want to see him make a statement to the whole UFC MMA community, like, shut the fuck up, guys. I'm still a badass, whooping ass, knocking people the fuck out, and I want my next fight to be a top 5 guy. Then after that, give me my title fight. If he goes and does that, like, you can't really hate on Ian Gary, right? But there's a chance that he could be in his head. What if he does lose? Because if he does lose, he's gonna get trolled, and they're gonna. The internet's gonna come after him, right? And I know it shouldn't matter, but I'm sure he's thought about it, right? And like, it would suck, but being at that professional level, your mental state has to be real strong just to get there. So I think he'll be all right, but I really want to see him get a W and just come out victorious on that fight, because I know it would mean a lot to his career, to him mentally, emotionally, making that statement, and just focus on fighting. So I really hope he wins, and I think he can do it. I think he can get a finish against Geoff Neal. So we'll see how that goes. Again, this fight's going to be a very, very good one. They're going to be in their faces, exchanging. So we'll see how that goes. But give a quick prediction. I think, Ian Gary does the same thing, attacks the leg kicks and just beats up that calf, and then finds a way to find the chin and finishes him in a TKO. I think how this fight's going to go. So we'll see what happens, really. All right, guys, to wrap up the show, we'll talk about the first fight, which is Anthony Hernandez versus Roman Kopylov. Sorry to mispronounce the last name, but I'm not too familiar with either of those guys. So I'm going to just be watching as a casual, you could say. And, it's to start off the UFC 298. So hopefully it starts strong. These names that I'm not too familiar with, Those guys usually put out a lot of effort on these fights, especially that you're going to be the first fight of the card. I think both these guys are just going to make a statement, and hopefully we get a nice performance. But that's really it, guys. Hopefully the episode wasn't too long, but I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know who you guys have. Let me know how excited you guys are to watch these fights. And I guess what fight are you most, looking forward to besides the main event? Mine would be the Henry Cejudo versus Merab. I think that fight's going to be fucking awesome, and it's just going to mean a lot for the division. So that's the fight besides the main event that I'm looking most forward to. So I'm curious to know, besides the main event, which other fight is the one that you're looking forward to the most. So that's the end of the episode. I hope you guys have a great week. I hope you guys are having a great week, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.